Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. As you may have already guessed by the title of the video, today we are talking about how to tell whether freelance illustration might or might not be a good career for you. And before I dive into the points, I do just want to give a broad, general disclaimer, that's the word, disclaimer, that these things are what I find to be generally true and what has been my experience and the experience of a lot of other illustrators that I know, mostly from online, because that's the only place I know other illustrators, but they may not necessarily be your experience. So I'm going to list off some things that could be clues, to whether illustration will be a good fit for you or not, whether freelance illustration will be a good fit for you career-wise or not. But like anything, there are exceptions. And then in addition to exceptions, it might be that these things, maybe these are true for you right now, but if you continue practicing and growing in your work and pushing yourself, they won't be true for you in the future. So that's enough disclaiming for now. I'll just go ahead and jump right into the first point. Okay, so point number one, freelance illustration might not be for you if you can't handle rejection. And what I mean by rejection isn't like, you sending your work in and then getting a response that says, this is terrible, we would never use this. That really, in my experience, that has never happened. The rejection usually just ends up being like a lot of crickets, like a big silence. There's no response at all. So what it could look like is you've sent some work to an art director and you're really excited about it, really hoping to work with them, whether it's a publication or a branding agency or whatever, and you've sent it off and you feel really good about it, but there's just no response back, and months go by and there's no response. Or you put a piece that you feel really excited about, that you've put a lot of work into, you put that online and it gets like half as much engagement as some of your other stuff. So it's not very often that it's direct rejection. And I'm guessing if there are people that make more controversial work or approach more controversial topics, or I'm sure there are people that do have more overt rejection, like the response being, this is terrible, or I hate this, or I don't like it. But I don't even think of that necessarily as rejection. It's more like outright criticism. But anyway, if it's hard for you to handle that in any form, whether it's outright criticism or just sort of the silent rejection of not hearing back from a submission, then this could be a hard career for you, because there is a lot of that, especially at the beginning. So if you already know that that's a challenge for you, I would suggest finding ways to build yourself up internally, to kind of compartmentalize how you feel about that a little bit, and in order to make yourself able, in order to make space so that you're able to keep on sharing work despite the risk of rejection. All right, number two, freelance illustration might not be for you if you don't like working alone. And again, there are exceptions to this, of course, people who work in group studios or who are part of agencies, but for the most part, freelance illustrators are pretty solitary folk. They tend to work on their own, tend to work at home for the most part. Some people do have outside studios, but a lot of working at home, a lot of working on your own. So if you are somebody who is only motivated or is best motivated by getting out of the house, by working with other people, by having a team, by being accountable to other people who are doing your same role, who are in the same role as you, then this could be challenging, and you might have to find some other ways to motivate yourself and other ways to get kind of human engagement during the day if that's something that's really important for you. Number three, it might not be for you if you are unwilling to adjust your work to client feedback. So this, I think, is true regardless of what kind of illustration you're doing. Whether you're doing commercial illustration, like for advertising or packaging, or whether you're doing editorial illustration, or whether you're working with private clients, doing, pet portraits or something, you have to be willing to accept client feedback and be able to do it graciously and gracefully, and potentially even work in and incorporate some of their feedback into your work. So if you are somebody who says, I made this, it's good as it is, I'm not touching it, I'm not changing a thing. If that's your attitude about your work, you will probably have a hard time in this industry. You might fit better in more of like a fine arts industry, although even fine artists can make a lot of their income from private commissions, so they still have to work with clients. Yes, whether you're a fine artist or an illustrator, you could potentially reach a point in your career where you're so established and you're such a known commodity that you would have sort of the personal cachet to be able to say, no, I don't change anything. What I make is, it is as it is. Like if you've ever been to a restaurant, like maybe a fancier restaurant where the chef, there'll be a little note down at the bottom of the menu that says like, there's no changes. The chef has made these dishes to be the best possible as they are, and they're not going to make any changes. But most restaurants, if you ask for something to have, no garlic in it, or to be cooked in oil instead of butter or whatever, most restaurants will be willing to accommodate, and most commercial illustrators have to be willing to accommodate as well. Now, that's not to say you just do everything that the client asks or whatever they ask, especially if there are requests that are unreasonable. I have a whole video about that, actually 2 videos. One is dealing with clients, I think is the name of the video, working with clients, and then the other one is dealing with client revisions. So I will try to leave both of those in the description box. But yes, if your attitude towards your work is that it's good as it is, and you refuse to make any changes to it, then commercial illustration will be tricky for you. All right, number 4. If you can only draw something, if you can only paint something, if you can only produce good work, if you are excited about the topic, or if you are personally interested in the topic, then again, this may be a tricky fit for you industry-wise, because especially if you're doing something like editorial illustration, where you have to work on quite a lot, you have to produce quite a lot of illustrations over the course of a year to be able to kind of feed into your business. You will very likely be illustrating things that you are not interested in, or maybe that you don't like looking at, or that you don't care about. You have to find something else that motivates you, some other kind of internal motivation to be able to still produce your same caliber of high quality work, whether or not you're excited about the subject. Now, some of that I think is actually more of a learned skill than an innate personality preference. Like whether you enjoy working alone or not is kind of innate. That is kind of a set characteristic, in my opinion. There are ways that you can change and that you can grow, but I think that is mostly just an innate preference, one way or another, an innate characteristic. But at this point, whether you can produce your same quality of work regardless of subject matter, regardless of how invested you are in subject matter, I think that's something that you get better at over time. But if that's true for you right now, and you're getting started in illustration, or you're trying to get started in illustration, just be aware that that will be a challenge, because there will be plenty of times that you have to draw something that you aren't that into, and the expectation will be that you can still deliver the same caliber of work, the same level of work that you produce when you are excited about the topic. All right, number 5, freelance illustration may not be for you if you don't deal well with working under a deadline. So I think that this is true in a lot of the creative world, but deadlines are super important. And if you're anything like me, you have almost like searing, traumatic memories of being in school and having these deadlines and being so stressed about meeting them. And, whether it's for papers or for tests or turning in pieces of artwork, for me, this was a real challenge. And having a deadline was something that I always was able to make deadlines. I was never somebody who turned stuff in late. I'm not a procrastinator, but it was really stressful for me. So I would say if you are if you are naturally a procrastinator, or if you find deadlines really stressful and it makes it so you can't really produce work very well, that will be a big challenge. So either end of the spectrum, if you're like me, somebody who doesn't really have a problem meeting deadlines but finds it incredibly stressful, you'll have to find a way to kind of manage that stress and deal with that. Or at the other end of the spectrum, if you're somebody who procrastinates and tends to miss deadlines, you will have to find a way to learn how to meet deadlines, because that is definitely an expectation and a huge important part of working in this industry. And that's not to say that you can never have a time or two that you missed a deadline or that you ask for an extension. But if it's something that you do regularly, it will be noticed, and it will make it so it's hard for you to get repeat clients, or hard for people to want to refer you, because many different fields, many different aspects of commercial illustration, like magazines and newspapers. They have print deadlines. If you're doing stuff in advertising, they have production deadlines. If you're doing stuff in packaging, they also have rollout deadlines. So all of these little fields in commercial illustration, the niches rather, in commercial illustration, are really heavily dependent on deadlines. So being able to manage deadlines and deal well with them is a crucial skill. All right, number 6, freelance illustration may not be for you if you don't like to deal with any of the messy, not glamorous, practical business stuff. So if all you want to do is draw and paint all day, every day, and you don't want to have to deal with contracts or understanding legal terms and invoicing, if you are just completely opposed to doing that, if you don't want it to be a part of your practice at all, then this may not be the right fit for you. Or it may be that you are going to be really into illustration, but it's not something that you're necessarily going to do at a commercial level. Maybe it will be more of a vocation for you, something that you live into alongside another career. But in order to be able to do it as a career, as a business, you have to have some basic business skills. So you have to be able to deal with your bookkeeping, with your invoicing, with producing contracts, understanding legal terms enough to be able to read a contract that's sent to you and agree to it or not, to ask changes or not. Dealing with some of that nitty-gritty business stuff ends up being very important. It's not necessarily that important in the beginning. If you have watched my video, the one first thing you should do as a beginning illustrator, I talk a lot in that video about how the most important thing initially is really to just focus on creating work and making work. So if you are in that place, all you want to do is paint and draw, and you're at the beginning of your career and you're not like relying on it financially yet, then that's great and that's fine. You can spend all your time, all the time that you have, just producing work and creating work. But there will come a point when if you're wanting to do it full time, if you're wanting to go completely freelance, if you're ready to kind of shift gears and level up, there will come a time when you have to be ready to tackle that business stuff, and you have to be able to do it at a level where you understand it and you feel competent with it, and just recognize that it's going to take up a chunk of your time. And as a full-time freelance illustrator who has gotten busier and busier over the last few years, I am producing a lot more work, but I also spend a lot of time on stuff that is not artwork, stuff that's not like actively painting and drawing. So you just have to be prepared for that fact that especially as you get more successful and you get busier, you may end up spending less of your time actually doing the thing that you love to do. So it's kind of a catch-22. That aspect of it, honestly, is something that I'm struggling with, and I'm trying to make sure I still spend absolutely as much time as I can drawing and painting, even with all of these other obligations. But just knowing that going in, hopefully that'll be helpful if that's something that you think you might struggle with. Okay, last point number 7. This is a very practical, direct, honest suggestion here. And I do just want to be really clear about this. I always try to be as transparent as I can about things like this. But freelance illustration may not be for you if you need money right now, today. So if you are if you're the primary person supporting your family, if you're on your own and you don't have any sort of a safety net and you're like looking for a job to get started on right now, know that freelance illustration, it is absolutely possible to make a living income on that and to make a full-time income and to live well on that. But it takes a few years, or maybe even, I don't know, I would say probably like, depending on how lucky you are, lots of factors, depending on lots of factors. This is a huge range, but I would say it takes like 3 to 5 years to be able to really depend on it and rely on it and have built up enough of a financial cushion that when there are lean times that you can kind of draw from that. So if you are in a place where you need money right now today, you have to go get a job. You have to go get a day job. You can't rely on freelance illustration to be that for you from day one. It takes a long time to build it up. And related to that, if you live in the US and you have to buy health insurance, then that may also be sort of a make or break situation. You may end up having to have another job that provides health insurance so that you can still do illustration on the side. In order to be able to buy health insurance, the amount of income that you have to bring in from illustration, depending on the state you live in, there's all kinds of other factors there, would be quite substantial in the US. So if you live in a country where healthcare is provided, then it's less of a consideration. But if you live in the US, that is a significant consideration. And I've tried to always be really honest about the fact about my own privilege, that I have a partner, I have a husband who has a regular 9-to-5 job, and we get health insurance through his job. So it's not been something that I have had to worry about carrying on my own. And even with that like super practical last note, I don't want that to be a downer, because even if you are in that place where you really need income right now, need practical income right now, actual income right now, and maybe have to carry health insurance as well, that doesn't mean that you couldn't get to full-time freelancing eventually. If you built it up and it grows along the side and you get it to a level where you can take that step. But a lot of people talk about like taking the leap into freelance, and it is a leap, but you want to do it as cautiously. Maybe this is just my personality. I'm probably more of a cautious planner type, but you want to do it as cautiously as possible. So taking the leap, it may not necessarily work out if you haven't planned well enough, if you haven't built yourself a safety net, if you haven't already started getting clients in the door, if you haven't saved up enough to be able to make the transition and kind of ride it out if there are some lean times. Just the idea, just like thinking positive and taking the leap, that may not necessarily be enough if you haven't done the planning. So I'm trying to say a positive thing here. I'm trying to say that if you work on it, if you grow it along the side, if you plan and you get ready, you may still be able to do that later on, even if you're in a position right now where you need to work a 9-to-5 and you have to get a regular job immediately. Yeah, I hope this was a helpful video. I'm, again, wanting it to be actually more of a positive thing, or maybe give you some ideas of ways that you could grow or things that you could work on if you're an aspiring illustrator and you're hoping to get started into this field, or maybe if you've just gotten started into this field and you're struggling. Yeah, so I think I'm definitely a growth mindset person. I think pretty much anything can be tackled and changed, and we can grow in all of these areas. But just having a sense of where some of the tough spots might be, where some of the sticky spots might be when you're getting started, is something that I find really helpful, because it gives me an idea of where I need to grow. So hope that was the case for you. And thank you for watching regardless. If you're new, please do subscribe and hit the thumbs up button on the video if you like the video. Leave questions or comments in the comments. And thank you to my patrons who sponsor my channel financially. They make it possible for me to hire a video editor, which makes it possible for me to get videos out there on a weekly basis, even though I'm a working freelance illustrator. And thank you to Meg, who edits the videos. I think that's it. I think that's all for the thank yous. Hope you guys have a great week, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.